funding Obamacare to the debt ceiling plan. So, is the talk of a government shutdown real, or will John Boehner blink? As the clock ticks, the pressure is on the House Speaker, and the Republican infighting is not helping. That's today's topic for our agenda panel. Daphne Linzer is managing editor at MSNBC.com. Zerlina Maxwell is a political analyst and contributor to the GRIO. And Bill Scher is executive director at Liberal Oasis. Thank you all for being here this morning.
Thank you.
So we're counting down right now to this 12:30 Senate vote. We should also mention that the markets have been falling today on the debt limit worries, but the House GOP still has no clear path forward. The New York Times editorial board wrote this about the list of policy ideas tied to the debt ceiling fight, calling it, quote, a jaw-dropping list of ransom demands containing more than a dozen discredited Republican policy fantasies. The absurdity of the list shows just how important it is that Mr. Obama ignore every demand and force House extremists to decide whether they really want to be responsible for an economic catastrophe. So, Bill, I'm going to start with you. What is Boehner supposed to do with this mess?
Well, Boehner is being jammed by his own party, but I think anyone has to recognize there is no way that Boehner is going to allow an actual debt default to happen. He may allow a shutdown to happen, because a shutdown is bad for the economy, but it's survivable. A debt default, it would spark a global depression and risk Democrats taking over the House. So Republicans have three options available to them. They can see the light now and start proposing reasonable demands and not hostage demands. Two, they can see the light at the last minute and just cave. Or number three, they can not see the light and force Boehner to put something on the floor that gets passed with Democratic votes mainly. And that might lead to a coup attempt. I think Boehner can weather that, but I'll leave the other panelists to respond and get to that later.
Now, the party does seem to be fighting a civil war of sorts, politically speaking. Let's listen to a little bit of how things got heated on the floor last night.
I don't think ever in the history of the Senate have we had a 21-hour filibuster, and then the persons carrying out the filibuster voted for the issue they were filibustering.
Why is Majority Leader Harry Reid going to vote the same way you're proposing to vote? Why is every Democrat in this chamber going to vote the way you're proposing to vote?
Now, normally we ask the question, what's going to unify the two parties? But, Daphne, I want to ask you, in this case, what's the common ground for the different factions of the Republican Party?
That's right. I mean, you see a very unified Democratic front here on Obamacare, on the economy, on where they stand on a shutdown and the debt ceiling, and we see just an absolute civil war mess within the GOP. And that Corker Ted Cruz exchange, which went on and on and on, I think was really indicative of a disaster place. And a party that is unified and that has a unified front is probably going to win on this one, and a party that's just a mess and that has nothing to show but division, which frankly it just keeps getting worse and worse. I don't see this party even recovering sort of 20 hours after the faux filibuster from the damage it caused. So I see just, a lot more division, and frankly, that is what they are projecting.
And Zerlina, I want to ask you about the public price that the GOP may pay for this when it comes to perception and support. Michael Tomasky of the Daily Beast predicts that they will pay a price for this, writing, you can only set so many houses on fire before people finally figure out this isn't happening by accident and you must be an arsonist. The GOP is now flirting with that moment. I want to also listen to what Nancy Pelosi had to say about that just a few moments ago.
The Republicans sowed the seeds of this dangerous partisan path we find ourselves on today. It's impossible for Democrats to negotiate with House Republicans where they can't even negotiate with themselves. Instead of legislating responsibly, they want to live dangerously, and that's not good.
Zerlina, will we see public outrage directed at the GOP over these issues?
I think so. I mean, that's only if in 2014 we turn out the way we didn't in 2010, which led to what we're dealing with now. But you have 40 or so Republicans in the House that refuse to govern. They got elected and they don't want to do anything to actually govern the country. I think really we're talking about a kamikaze caucus here where they just are in there and they don't want to do anything responsible to make sure that people get jobs. We're not talking about jobs. We're not talking about the fact that we're still in sequestration. All of this is a really outrageous and insane conversation about defaulting on the debt, which used to be a routine vote.
Faux filibuster, kamikaze caucus.
Yes.
I'm getting all these new fun political terms today. Now, not everyone in the Republican Party is on this so-called crazy train. Let's hear a little bit of what New Jersey Governor Chris Christie had to say during an interview for this week's CBS
I don't think you
Sunday
hear
morning.
responsible Republican leaders advocating a shutdown of the government. I think it's always irresponsible if you're running the government to be advocating for shutting it down. That, by definition, is a failure. You got to work it out.
So, Bill, how does the party handle this extreme wing of the GOP?
That's why at the end of the day, Boehner's going to have to lean on Democrats. He cannot keep the party hostage to this faction of 40, because if they're seen as this irresponsible, they will lose the House. So Boehner doesn't get to be Speaker anyway. That's why if Boehner puts something on the floor, pass with mainly Democratic votes, if the coup attempt comes from the Tea Party right, that they can't take him out with Republican votes alone because the party is not unified. They would need Democrats to join the coup. Boehner can go to Democrats, go to Pelosi and say, hey, keep me as Speaker, make me a bipartisan Speaker, and you'll get immigration reform. You join them, you'll get nothing. So Boehner has a get-out-of-coup-free card. I understand why he doesn't want to play it today, but if it gets to that point, he'll survive, I believe.
Get-out-of-coup-free card. All right, Bill Scher of Liberal Oasis, MSNBC.com's Daphne Linzer, and the Grio's Zerlina Maxwell, thank you all for being here this morning.